So my go-to killing time on the Steam Deck after work and the kids are in bed games have been Hades and Hades 2 lately. I mentioned it to my colleagues yesterday and they were all like, yeah, we keep seeing the notification on Steam. Every day like clockwork, it's a running gag we have now. Whoops, looks like Yahtzee's on the Hades again. Funny how that doesn't creep us out as much as it probably should, doesn't it? But yes, I am on the Hades. After I reviewed Hades 2, I remembered I'd never gotten around to finishing Hades 1, so I did that, and then I was like, well, I've got all the context now, so I went straight on to replaying Hades 2 from the start. It's a good game. Supergiant Games have really perfected their formula of isometric hack-and-slash fantasy game about very sexy, articulate people with communication issues, and more than once I've been asked if I think Hades 2 is a better game than Hades 1. The answer is complicated, and brings to mind the broader topic of what makes a good sequel. Plot-wise, I prefer Hades 1, for the same reason I put the plot of Silent Hill 2 above Silent Hill 1, because it's a much more personal narrative between complex characters. It's not about a hero defeating a villain or world-ending threat, it's about a petulant youth and his grumpy dad getting over their inability to properly communicate. It's infused with all the fun, violence, and melodrama of a Greek mythological setting where all the characters know that none of them can permanently die, but it's ultimately about personal growth. Hades 2, meanwhile, is about a hero defeating both a villain and a world-ending threat, and the increased scope results in the plot losing a lot of depth, like the contents of a backyard pool being transferred to an Olympic-sized one. And plot aside, I was initially concerned that Hades 2 was turning out to be a bit of a same-again sequel, that is to say, same formula again but with the names and wallpaper changed. Start at home base, pick a weapon, proceed through 4 themed areas with a colourful boss at the end of each, have a go at the final boss, then repeat until new plot events stop happening. But as you'll recall from my review, I was pleasantly surprised when the Mount Olympus path opened up, essentially a whole additional Hades game, and I was like, phew, it's not a same-again sequel, it's a same but more of it sequel. It's called Hades 2 because it's literally 2 Hades games. So even though the story is a little weaker, I'd have to say Hades 2 wins overall, just by sheer volume. I once said in a review, I forget exactly which, cut me some slack, I've done like 1,000 of the buggers, that a good sequel treats its predecessor as something to jump off from to explore new dimensions, whereas a bad sequel merely wallows in its predecessors like a hippo in a pond, doing little more than call back to the original and go around the same houses again. I don't think one could argue Hades 2 isn't in the former category, but in the time since I wrote those words, I think this issue has acquired more nuance in my mind than sequel good, sequel bad. I now think going around the same houses can be a valid approach for a sequel if the previous game had flaws or didn't reach its full potential. I think of Persona. Leaving aside a lot of small details, Persona 5 is broadly speaking hitting the same beats as Persona 3 and 4. High school life sim, Dungeon of the Human Subconscious, catch all the Persona mon, and then evil god power of friendship, yada yada yada, but refines the experience so well as to reinvent it. The bad kind of wallowing in the original sequel happens when the original didn't leave much to improve upon, or any story threads worth following. I think of God of War 2, to take things back to Greek mythology. God of War 1 has a perfectly self-contained plot about a violent bastard seeking to assuage his guilt for being a violent bastard, and ends with his arc concluded. As such, God of War 2 didn't have much of anywhere to go except dig all the violent bastardy back up and take it to a new array of reinterpreted mythical locations and monsters, which goes to show what kind of damaging effect a bad sequel can have. Kratos in God of War 1 had a much wider range of emotions. He could be a sad and remorseful violent bastard, as well as an angry one. Come the sequel, taking place after his character arc was resolved, all they could do was wind him back to what he was popularly understood to be, that is, angry violent bastard. Something similar happens in the sequels to Horizon Zero Dawn, Jedi Fallen Order, and the Tomb Raider reboot. Aloy, Cal Kestis, and Lara all have complete character arcs in the first game, so they've got bugger all to do in the sequel except to go around being blandly efficient, all their edges sanded down into broad, predictable tedium. And the worst kind of sequel for wallowing in the original is of course the Legacy sequel, generally because such things are created mainly to bank off nostalgia for past success. Thief VR and Return to Monkey Island fit the bill for this category, a cynical and unpleasant bill on the face of a very antisocial duck. If a property was electrifying enough in the first place to warrant a sequel, the only way a sequel's going to recreate that effect is by finding new places to take the concept. So let's move on to sequels that jump off from predecessors. I called Hades 2 a the same but more of it sequel, and the other name I have for that kind of thing is the We Love Katamari sequel. We Love Katamari was the first sequel to Katamari Damacy, and in many ways provides more or less exactly the same experience as the original. You roll stuff up into a ball in a variety of contemporary settings, and eventually roll all of the stuff in the world into the biggest ball of all. But We Love Katamari took it a bit further, adding a few variant levels, an even more spectacular climax, and generally tidied up the design and the level of challenge. So on the one hand, it's a little bit of a lazy expansion pack of a sequel, but on the other, when I get nostalgic for a bit of rolling action, I play We Love Katamari. I don't play the original, because it is the original, but better. Still think it was a mistake they didn't remaster them both at the same time. I have a similar relationship with Doom. If I feel nostalgic for Doom, I play Doom 2, because it's exactly the same as Doom 1, but with more monster varieties and a loft conversion built onto the shotgun. In short, a the same but more of its sequel runs the risk of rendering the original obsolete, and I think that's a bit sad from an archivist point of view. So obviously, a sequel should always do the jumping off thing by widening the scope and exploring new exciting worlds of story and gameplay each time, right? Well, I have to call that particular stance to question as well, thanks to a little game called Resident Evil 6. That certainly jumped off into new areas with its grand globe-trotting plot, bringing in multiple established characters and exciting, innovative multiplayer elements, and that game's fucking terrible! Not even incidentally, it's terrible because of its increase in scope. None of the many characters have room to breathe, and there's none of the slow build of tension that's essential for horror. Its sequel, Resident Evil 7, rescued the franchise by scaling things all the way back down again. It's about one dude trapped in one house, and while you could argue that's still jumping off to explore new realms in a sense, it's about as narrow as scope gets. So in conclusion, it turns out there's a lot of complications attached to the question of what makes a good sequel, and I think the question's barking up the wrong tree anyway. Here's my new answer to how to make a good sequel: just make a good fucking game that would be good regardless of any previous games, but not in such a way that we no longer need to play the original. I think Portal 2 pulls that off. It's bigger, it's full of new ideas, but there are times when I'd rather play the first one, especially times when I don't have as many times to spare, as it were. And I'd say Hades 2 pulls it off as well. Playing a game that's a whole 2 Hades games is all very well, but sometimes I'm not after the world-saving epic narrative. Sometimes I just want to imagine teasing my grumpy dad until he tries to murder me, usually right after my weekly therapy session.